Hi guys, my name is Erin and today I will be talking about my multimodal project on the writing process. So to begin, I wanted to focus on the writing process because I think it's an important part of learning. However, although there are many topics that are important to learning, I feel closer to home with this one. So I believe it's important to lead students towards what they find intriguing, and I feel very strongly that you could do that through writing. Writing is part of our daily habits. Now with technology, we have our phones, our computers, and with that we are almost constantly texting or writing emails or instant messaging. And if you're not, good for you, because I sincerely applaud you. But it's everywhere. And although we're not doing the writing process on an everyday basis, we're definitely writing. But the writing process, or just writing in general, especially if you're doing expository essays or anything like that, it gives you, it takes you to another level of thinking. So, what is writing? Writing is a part of communication. Again, we're constantly communicating every single day. Normally when we write, we either write about our culture, sometimes we write about our emotions, our lives. It can get very creative. So it intertwines with our language. It has almost the same structure of speech. So the way that I'm speaking to you is almost the same way that I can write. So before writing can be applied, we have to learn how to speak. And this process in speaking is a big part of writing. So there are structures of vocabulary and grammar that are very important to help set up the learning process of writing. So with that being said, we'll go into the 5 stages of the writing process. First of all, there's pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. So pre-writing is number 1, drafting is number 2, revising is number 3, editing is number 4, and publishing is number 5. With pre-writing, it's basically what you're planning to write about. Some may call this brainstorming, and if they don't, I need to figure that out quickly. But I call it brainstorming, especially when I'm planning to write. So first, we got to choose a topic that interests you, or me. Second, think about our purpose, our audience, and our genre. So before moving on to explaining our purpose and our genre, so we choose a topic. I had decided with brainstorming because when I was in elementary school, they had taught me a spider web. And I don't know if that's an old term or still a new term or not a term at all, but I remember it as a spider web. Some now will call these graphic organizers or a bubble map. So I decided to write about an orange. And so my topic is an orange. So first, in each little bubble that I have, drew out, or with my spider map, there's a question. And so one of the questions is, what does it feel like? Well, an orange can feel bumpy, it can feel round. I don't know if you can feel round, but this is just an example. It can feel rough sometimes. The next question, we come down to, what does it look like? Well, it looks round. It's definitely the color orange. Next is, what does it smell like? Well, sometimes we can smell sweet and we can smell tangy, but that might be, what does it taste like? So, don't mind that. Again, this is just an example. And then, where does it grow? These are just questions and examples, and I put it grows on a tree, it grows in warm weather. So this can be considered a bubble map or a spider web, as I would call it. And it's a graphic organizer. So when you're handing students ideas to get their brain going, to brainstorm, A graphic organizer is a really good way to do it, or you could make one up yourself when you are trying to write. Sometimes there are 5 senses of brainstorming. Again, this is kind of going back to the orange. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Prompting questions like that. So now we're going to move on to the purpose. I hope that didn't take too long. But the purpose is writing to either entertain, to inform, or to persuade. So if I'm writing about my orange, I could go either way. I could persuade somebody to eat an orange if they've never had it before, or why oranges are the best fruit in the world. Or I could inform them of what an orange is, how does it grow, where does it grow, etc. So lots of facts going into that. Or I could entertain and explain why I love oranges. And entertaining can come with being humorous or very emotional about that topic. My audience would be, who my reader is. If I'm targeting a 5th grader versus a 1st grader, how am I going to write my paper in terms to connect with that reader? So the purpose for my paper, which is, to inform you guys that I am very knowledgeable about the writing process and, what I've learned about it. And my audience would be you, the viewer, or, my professor. So lastly, genre can be anything from a journal, or letters, or poetry, stories, or writing a persuasive piece. Sometimes there are a few questions that you could ask yourself during the pre-writing process. Well, what do I want to say? What do I know about this subject, and how will I expand in detail? And I think that those are very good questions, especially if you're not quite sure where to start. So after pre-writing, again, is drafting. So we're on to our second step in drafting, the drafting of your paper. This is when, after you do your pre-writing and your brainstorming, this is when you can start creating a rough copy of your writing. And the ideas that were accumulated in the pre-writing stage can now be put onto paper in sentences. Just realize during the drafting stage that it's not going to be tailored to the way that you'd like it to be. I know myself, when I'm writing a piece, I always try to make it as perfect as possible the first time, because if I have to be honest, sometimes I get lazy and I don't want to go back and I don't want to revise. But it has to happen. So it's not always going to be perfect the first time, and it's going to feel very unorganized, and there's probably going to be many mistakes. But not to worry, because next is the revising stage. And so at this stage, this allows you to make your paper perfect. Or close to perfect, or however you'd like it to be, whatever you feel is satisfying enough to go ahead and move on with the writing stages and the writing process. So during the revising stage, you're allowed to either add or subtract pieces to your paper. So if I said an orange is pink, and I know that my information's wrong, and I have to go back and revise that and edit it, well then now I could go ahead and say, well, an orange is actually orange. And that's probably a really bad example, but hopefully you get it. So so with that, you can also, there's a few things that you can do to revise your work. And so first, reread your rough draft. Some people can just reread it once and think that that is good enough. I know myself have to read it more than twice, just to make sure that everything is clean cut. And so sometimes you do have to go back and reread it 3 or 4 times. Next, share it with others. When you share it with others, this allows them to give you feedback so you can become a better writer. That way that your composition is in tip-top shape, and you know how they feel about your writing. And if your goal is to target a specific audience and it's not targeting them, then you could go ahead and think, well, what do I need to do to better this piece so I'm targeting, the audience that I'd like to target. Third is to revise. Again, you can add or subtract phrases or even words. If one sentence sounds better at the beginning rather than the end, then this time allows you to go ahead and do that. And then 4, meet with your advisor or your teacher, professor. That way they can go ahead and suggest changes that you may have missed during this process, or even advise you in other areas that are needed. And so then after your revising, then is your editing. So just going back, because I did miss a point, during your revising, if you have a written piece of paper, you could cross out anything or take away, and you could go ahead and do that for corrections. And then once you're to the editing stage, which we're at now, this is where all of your improvements are made. And so this allows you to change the mechanics and correct spelling, punctuation, or other grammatical errors that you may be needing. So once the editing stage is completed, now you have, now the next step is to go ahead and publish your work. This is your final piece. After this, you're done, which, is great, right? So this is your final piece. You've already went through steps 1 through 4, and now you're ready to publish. So with this, you just be aware that sometimes, even if you have revised your paper and reread it about 3 or 4 times, there may still be some errors. And if there's not, then that's great, and you are an awesome writer, probably better than me, but that's great. So there may still be a little bit of errors, but most of the time we do want to see it error-free. So after that, aside from the 5 stages of writing, there is also writer's craft. And I think that this is really awesome. However, it is very close to the writing process. But there's 6 traits that I think that we can add on to help better the writing. So these traits are: number 1, ideas; 2, organization; 3, voice; 4, word choice; 5, sentence fluency; and last is convention. So first, ideas. These can be similar to brainstorming, and it's like the writing, it's like the pre-writing. But once we know what our idea is, and once it's matured, this helps our idea is actually clear. It becomes more clear. So that's something that we want to think about during the pre-writing stage, is if we feel that our idea is mature. That way we can move on. Second is organization. This is how our composition is structured. Sometimes when we're writing stories, we have our story elements, which is our characters and our setting and our plot, and this is what makes the structure of the story. Also, sometimes in expository essays, you have the format, which is introduction, body, and our conclusion. Each piece is usually a paragraph, and in a persuasive essay, it's usually about 5 paragraphs or more, and it could be as many paragraphs as you want. Usually there is introduction, 3 pieces of body, and a conclusion. Next is our voice, and this is our writing style, and this could either be humorous, reflective, or even persuasive. And so each of these, humorous or reflective or persuasive, can really tell the reader, going into our sentence fluency and our word choice, what our composition is about, and so that really helps. So with word choice, it gives readers an idea and the meaning of state of mind about the composition. Sentence fluency is making sure